Good afternoon. Welcome to AI Would Agree. If you're watching us for the first time, welcome to the show. This is a conversation where I generally interview interesting people from across the customer experience, customer services, technology industry, AI, machine learning, leaders, and other interesting people that I think that there's some interesting cross-industry or cross-function learnings for the people that are in my audience. So thank you very much if you're watching the show, and thanks for coming along. If you're watching us back afterwards, great to see you guys too. Try and make it live next time, please. And guys, this is a live show. So whilst I'm talking to my guest today, if anybody's got any questions, anything they'd like to ask either me or Matt, who's going to be my guest, please feel free. Do ask the questions in the chat on LinkedIn, and we'll be able to answer the questions, providing they're sensible. We'll be able to answer the questions for you. Hi, Matt. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Paul. It's good to see you again.
I feel like we're joined at the hip at the moment, spending a lot of time together.
I was thinking exactly the same thing. It's like extended family. You're my northern family.
Well, shame for you, but I'm all right.
And it's good to know that the window cleaner has been and gone, so we won't get that.
Yeah, for everybody who's watching the show, whilst I was sat having a quick chat with Matt before the show, my window cleaner appeared and smashed his brush onto the window right beside my head and nearly frightened me off my seat. So I'm pleased that didn't happen live, but the rest of you can probably sit there and picture that happening now. Thanks for that, Matt. Appreciate that. That's right. So yeah, Matt's here. I'm not going to do you the injustice of trying to tell people who you are, but Matt represents Link Mobility here in the UK. They're a good partner of ours that we're building our relationship out on currently. So I invited Matt along to the show because I didn't have anybody else, Matt. No, joking. No, it's. I think your journey in particular has been a really interesting one. So if you do us the honour, mate, of just kind of walking us through how you got involved in contact centres and technology in the first place, and what got you where you are right now.
Where do we start? Paul? So I
stay at the beginning, but don't go that far back. Don't need the whole nappies and diapers. And
I should introduce, I suppose, my job role and who I work for. So I'm the Global Enterprise Sales Director at Link Mobility. There you go. Just dropping that. We should have sound effects, a clang sound effect. And what does that mean? So I work within the sales enablement team. I'm based out of the UK, but working across multiple territories. We're a global organisation, and a real high-profile customer of ours described us as sales enablement when I discussed that with him, and he said, "You're kind of like the pit crew for a Formula One team." Now,
I like it.
I like that, and I don't think I could have come up with anything like that. So I'm claiming it, but I'm also giving them kudos as well. So yeah.
Brilliant.
My journey then. So where do I start? I actually started in a contact center following university, as most people do. Back in the day, I walked out of university, did my traveling, and then I walked into a call center, and I absolutely loved the vibe of it. Was all telephone led. It was all inbound and outbound dialing and what have you. But I love the culture. You get some colourful characters there, of course, but you have a great social scene. But you can also be successful, and the way that you're managed, and it kind of shapes you then for the future. And I suppose it was twofold really. I enjoyed the sales process, so working within the sales environment. I also really enjoyed the customer experience, so going through that process of working with and working for customers. So I went from there. I worked for the Royal Bank of Scotland Group for around 10 years. I then moved into my first foray into actual selling on the road, which was a real experience in the world of digital print. And from there, I got an opportunity through a good friend of mine to join a communications business, predominantly an SMS and outbound voice business. relatively small, 20 to 30 employees. And I absolutely loved it. Went in as a BDM, generated plenty of business, I'd like to say. Just a really, really enjoyable experience. And then through acquisition, we were merged into a larger company. And over time, and I worked for that business for just shy of 9 years. And I suppose, as most people have, they've sat back over the last couple of years and they've gone, oh, is this right for me? I'm working from home, got to make a decision for my future. And I decided to step away from the business that I previously worked for and looked out on the market. And that's where I saw that CPaaS, and it's we run a competition. Well, we will do today, Paul. Anybody that can actually tell us what CPaaS means, I think we'll chuck a fiver in, Paul.
We can't check whether people are Googling it.
You can drop it in the comments, Paul.
Everybody's after Amazon.
Yeah. So I predominantly went from a messaging business to a CPaaS business, and for clarity, it's a communication platform as a service. So we provide every kind of communication tool that you can imagine, really. So from outbound dialing, or voice products, as you will call them, through to email, SMS, OTT channels. So that's over-the-top messaging, such as WhatsApp, Viber, Facebook Messenger, RCS, etc. And that kind of resonated with me in terms of that whole CPaaS journey, and really enlightening customers, and making customer experience and customer journeys, as positive and giving that wow factor, really.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think a lot of people share a similar sort of start to their story who I end up speaking to. I freely talk about my background. When I was 20, working in a call center, it's where I met my missus. It's the reason I don't work in a call center anymore. That ambition is the very thing that got me into trouble and why we didn't work together after that. But yeah, I think it's a melting pot, right? Like there's all sorts of different skills and personalities that are needed to make the call center work. Like, how do you think that's evolved from what you've seen? Like, how do you think that's evolved over the last couple of years? Do you think that the old personalities are still there, kind of hybrid working, remote working? Does that still play the same effect?
Funny you should say that. I also met my missus. I should say that, just in case she watches this back. She won't be watching live, don't at said call center. In answer to your question, how has it changed? It certainly it's got to evolve in that hybrid working. And I suppose if I talk from my own personal experience, working out of my office here, I do miss that buzz of the office and bouncing ideas and creating, a real vibe and a real team ethic. So that side of it is difficult to do in terms of, it's got to be difficult to do in terms of hybrid working and what have you. There's definitely a shift within the contact center space, a lot more professional now than when you or I would have started there, I would presume, Paul. There's a lot more tools and capability that's out there, not just your old school dialing, if you like. There's so many different tools in terms of the way that customers can and the way that they want to interact. We're seeing a big shift to digital channels, not just to remove that human contact, but very much to complement that human contact. So we're definitely seeing that. And when I say digital channels, I'm not just talking about bots and automating absolutely everything. I know your esteemed leader. He talks passionately. About not automating and removing value. I think automation's got to be value add, and that's the kind of stuff that we do, to help complement that.
I think that's fair. I think Jimmy does his best to be very provocative at times, and it definitely comes off. And we love him for it because we wouldn't have him any other way. But yeah, I think it's exactly right. There's a time and a place for bots, and Jimmy's the first person to admit that. Like, he calls it along the line. But there's a time and a place for him, and the place for that sort of automated technology isn't to you shouldn't be trying to remove cost at the expense of your customer lifetime value, and that's what a lot of people, I think, get stuck into. Is and I've got this thing at the moment where, we've seen a lot of leaders, agents themselves, a lot of people in the contact center environment are their tenure's gone down. Staff retention is much lower than it's ever been, and it's never been a great environment for staff retention. It's more in the leadership side of things than the agents themselves. But I think
Sure.
now we've gone through the last couple of years, everybody's realigned their own values, opened the doors to hybrid and remote working, and now kind of everybody can, you can access any contact center as a job throughout the country, providing they offer remote work positions. So for me, there's a conversation about why would you focus on medium to long term goals when I'm not really going to be here. So I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, like I would suggest that probably the brands and the businesses that have a strong brand identity and people buy into why they're there are the businesses that are going to be able to sort of circumnavigate that, and encourage their people to think in the medium to long term because they believe in the vision of the business, not just in terms of what they're able to achieve at the short time that they're going to be there.
That staff culture has got to be at the top of the tree, really, in terms of that staff retention, because people, sure, they'll move for money, but if it's a role and a job that they really, really enjoy, and a business that they really, really are invested in, then absolutely they'll stick around and they'll stick with that business. They'll be fully immersed in that business, and they will think twice about leaving. Yeah, I get that. What kind of trends are you seeing differently then, Paul, with regards, because you're close to the contact center world?
I think there's a lot of push right now for people to celebrate people leaving them. So it sounds like a really weird thing to say. Like in the past, when you'd leave a business and it'd be kind of heads down, walk out the door, hand your notice in, do the exit interview, and you're gone, and I'll never come back here again. I think a lot of businesses are now embracing the fact that people do have a shorter tenure in retention, and they're actively trying to promote getting them a new job elsewhere where they're not satisfied in their current job. Because let's be honest, like the last thing you want is somebody who's got experience within the contact center in any given capacity getting bored or frustrated, even if there's no capability for them to move on within the current business. So why not give them the opportunity to go off to another business, improve their experience, improve their skill set, with the view that some of those people that you do send off will come back as a more senior person or a more broadened in their horizons and be able to add much more value to the team. And I think the companies that do that really well are now seeing sort of, they're starting to reap the benefits of what they've done during COVID. So, I was talking with a guy from Southampton City Council, fantastic conversation, James Marshall, I think it is. And he was talking about how he actively goes out and helps his agents and team leaders find roles either elsewhere within the business that maybe doesn't even speak to their skill set, but speaks to their personality. And I think that's key. But he's seeing a lot of those people now coming back over the last year or so, coming back to the business at a much more senior capacity, which has strengthened their team and sort of improved their recruitment process, because now they're able to hire much more accurately. They know kind of who's going to come back and who won't. So I think that's a really interesting, like almost unintended size effect.
That's it's an interesting take on it, and not something that I've seen. Ultimately, when you look on LinkedIn and you see the amount of people that are shifting jobs, and you do see it, don't you? And my personal contacts that have made that decision to move on, it does feel, I've not really picked up on that, but there is that celebration of somebody's career, and I suppose that tendency to not burn bridges, not to take offence as a business when somebody wants to back themselves or sees an opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's it. But I mean, to go back to what you said before, though, it's about giving them as good an experience as you can whilst they're with the business. And some of that comes from automating some of the tasks that are more mundane that they don't really add any value from doing. So, if you can get this is where bots kind of come in, is if you can get a bot to kind of do the ID and V at the beginning of a conversation, and that's, that data is persisted through to the agent, well, then why wouldn't you get a bot to do that? Because that's not something that requires human interaction. And it cuts down on the average handling time for the business, which means the conversations are shorter. So I think there's definitely a time and a place for the automation to assist with the more mundane, data analytics, sifting through large volumes of data, providing the insights so that the humans can then make decisions based on what they know and understand. And what you guys do kind of opens a lot of the doors to those analytics, because you're doing it in a really sort of tech-driven and innovative way, so that we can get outside of that box and think about what's possible as opposed to what we've always done. And what we've always done is a dangerous thing to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing a real shift in terms of the channels that are being brought on board by, there's traditional channels of contacting a customer over the phone, and email and paper. You'll know about paper. Getting those things posted through your letterbox, and what we're seeing is a real push towards. What I'm seeing is a real push towards keeping the individual or the customer within one customer journey, and then that is ultimately that's driven by the customer, because the customer wants to interact via that channel. So real groundswell around WhatsApp, for example. WhatsApp as a channel I see as extremely exciting, because you can take from day one inception of that customer being in contact with you, you can take them through that full journey, whether that's through booking a holiday, confirmation, tickets, seat booking, whatever it may be, as you go through that journey, upselling, but then always with that opportunity to hand off to a human if required. So we're seeing a real shift in that space of being able to manage that customer. We saw a great use case with regards to complaints within the utility space, and not managing the complaint in terms of the interaction of, or what is your complaint, but managing the customer expectation through that journey. And what we saw then is an awful lot of complaints not going to ombudsman level, for example. Yeah. The moment they go to ombudsman, I believe it's 500 quid. That may have changed. So if you need to fact check people, go ahead. But yeah, the benefit of keeping a customer informed that we've received your complaint, this is the process, and then following through with that process. So making that phone call or emailing or whatever it may be, that next step within that complaint process, it just saw and almost took out that whole next step, which was the escalation of somebody's frustration, which may have started off as something very, very minor. They might have had a poor interaction with a customer service agent. They might have a discrepancy on their bill. All of a sudden, that thing can just snowball. And if you don't take control of it, through the simplest means, if you like, of just keeping a customer informed. So I always hark back to that. That's one of my favorite use cases.
I think it's, I often talk about the IKEA effect, right? IKEA have a fantastic brand, and they don't have it because they have an amazing customer experience in store. It's quite the opposite. Like it's a pretty basic experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's them, and they're very aware of what their experience is, but they don't shy away from telling people what it is. And I think for me, the more often you can set that expectation for the next step or for the relationship in general, and tell them when it'll happen by or when it will happen, then you remove a lot of the anxiety that people face. And the more anxiety people face in a relationship, the more doubt that's created. And the moment that doubt appears, then you're on a slippery slope and you're going downhill. So what you're talking about there is exactly the opposite of that. Is like we can set almost micro expectations of here's what's going to happen next, here's how it's going to happen, here's when it's going to happen. You don't need to do anything, or you do need to do something. Here's when you need to do it, and here's how you can do it. And that can be built out into so many like fascinating customer journeys from what you guys do. And then on the back of that, kind of being able to understand how customers interact with that journey, understand where they might have dropped off, understand where the message might not have been clear enough, and be able to understand that side of the journey as well, so that you can always constantly improve and iterate. And I think people talk about technology as a demon sometimes. I think it's just the way that it's being used, right? Technology should be almost seamless for what we're used to. And I think that's the key with what you're talking about there with things like WhatsApp and things. It's what you're used to doing. Like we model our interface from iMessage, WhatsApp type interface, so it's easy for agents to use or team leaders to use. So is that something that you guys consider a lot?
Yeah, it's funny because I jotted down. I made a few notes. I did actually prepare, Paul. You'll be happy to know prior to joining you, and I put around creating fantastic customer experience, but also managing anxiety, and you touched on that. And we're moving into a world where there's going to be a lot of anxious people that are going to want to contact an awful lot of businesses, whether that be in financial services, utilities. There's going to be anxiety out there around propensity to pay, ability to pay, but also wanting to shift as well, wanting to change. I'll share with you my experience of, I'll roll this out. And if there's anybody here that knows me, they'll have heard this about a million times. But I had an experience, it was around Christmas time, not last year, the year before. And I'd ordered something from John Lewis. I'll name check them because they were great. And it arrived and it was broken. The same day, my 3-year-old daughter had removed my debit card. This is 3 days before Christmas, from my wallet, and I could not find it anywhere. I blame her, I can, because she's 3 and she won't respond.
She can't fight back.
And then the experience that I had with that high street bank, it took me 3 weeks. I know it was a Christmas period to replace that card. It took me a day to receive a replacement via John Lewis. John Lewis, the whole interaction was automated and for me, I think that's the perfect example. Is there value within that? There's a value in terms of resolving the issue. It was all resolved via WhatsApp, which was my choice to go via that channel.
Yeah.
Fantastic experience. If I ever need to contact them again, it's there on my phone. With my bank, let's be careful. With my bank, 3 weeks, and it was multiple phone calls, and I no longer bank with them. That was a choice and I'm a bit of a stick in the mud for that kind of thing. I'll stay with it been with that bank for 20 odd years. So, one poor customer experience can just shift you and move you out of your comfort zone of who you bank with. The way in which you're managed by the business that you interact with through the channel of choice. I think
the crazy thing is that single instance can be a complete non-reflection of their general business, and yet
absolutely
find yourself in that situation where you've fallen down the rabbit hole of where the process has got a weakness, and you find yourself in that moment, and it's so frustrating that I went through bereavement recently, and kind of how hard it is to find phone numbers for some businesses just for their team that deals with bereavements, and then you get through to the customer services line because you can't find a bereavement number, and they go, oh well, you need to speak to our bereavement team. Well, I've just sat for 20 minutes in the queue to speak to you. Could you not have made the bereavement number more obvious on the website somewhere, so I could have just gotten straight through with them? Like, I'm trying not to cause you problems, but you're causing yourself problems. So I think with the assistance of things like conversation analytics, being able to understand where those journeys fall down, where the problems are. And, there's very little way for businesses to get that granular level of detail in any other way other than kind of understanding exactly what's being said in each conversation, whether it's contacts on digital channels, whether it's voice channels. I see eyes opened every week when we do playbacks for our customers. It's kind of, I just assumed that was happening. Well, actually, no, it's not happening. And here's the reason why. And it's not that your agents are bad, and it's not that your processes are bad, and it's not that your leadership's bad. It's that you had no other way of knowing this until now. Now that you can measure it, now you can act on it. And that, for me, handing that power back to people and helping them make those decisions. I mean, that's what drives me as a person. Like, regardless of my job that I did 10 years in the police force before this is like a volunteer, because I enjoy helping people make better choices. That's why I am where I am. So to work with similar-minded people like yourselves who are offering up the businesses to be able to create those really customized journeys, I think that's really powerful, because it's so, like, I guess from your side of things, you never know where the next conversation is going to take you, right?
Exactly. I just to share one more experience with you. Life insurance, you take it out, don't you, Paul? And you don't do anything with it. You don't do anything with it. It's one of those.
Not.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you never do anything with it. And I moved house. I received a letter from said company. We need to update your details. Go here. You type it in and you scroll by, and you go in. Scroll by, is that still a thing? I'm not sure. Anyway, so you go in, you try and access that account. You can't access it because your email address isn't recognised. Callers, you call in, you go through that experience of, oh, you've called the wrong team. Well, you pointed me to this. But when you talked about bereavement there, when you put that into the mix as well, you're already anxious, aren't you? And you're in a place that you just need somebody to grab hold of it and sort it for you, in the most seamless way possible, ultimately.
Yeah, and that's it. That's what good technology does, right? If you look at some of the technology we use the most in our lives, it's adopted widely because it's seamless, it's frictionless in terms of what we do and how we do it. I've got an Amazon device in every room in my house because my son loves playing his music in every room in our house. Okay. Right? It's cost me a fortune to get set up. Would I use it for shopping? No, because the experience on voice for shopping through that is horrendous. Currently, I've no doubt they'll get there, but until it's improved massively, I won't shop through that. But I love shopping through the app, right? But if I want to do something else, then I'll generally do it through that, set reminders, all those sorts of things, because that works seamlessly. Anything that causes me any friction, then I'll just go, I'll do it the way the least friction-based way that I can do it. But ultimately, to your point before, people need to be able to be served in the channel that they want to get served in. It's not always, I don't think it's always the most appropriate. Sometimes people think, like if you think in the debt collection space and the recovery space, people will tend to go for digital channels because they feel embarrassed by being in debt in the first place. It's never, it's very rarely their fault that they're in debt, but they feel embarrassed by it. And I totally get that. But I do think that in that sort of situation, that human contact, even if it's via a chat or WhatsApp or a message, adds that human element to it, where they start to build that trust, where actually they'll feel much more confident with telling the problems that they've got, so that they can get a recovery package that fits them better and works with them, and people can understand them. So people's choices, I think, sometimes belie their true needs, which is something we've all got to be careful of.
It's interesting in the collection space, and you touch on that, and I've got a lot of experience of working with collections companies, and I've always thought that additional channels are the gateway to opening a conversation, because the moment somebody interacts, that's half the battle, getting that customer to interact. Once they've interacted through whatever method that may be, probably not a soulless email, because that's probably not the way to go, but something that resonates with them, that allows them to interact without physically having to speak to somebody. I think then it opens that gateway that when they do receive a phone call or they're invited to speak to somebody, the likelihood is that they're probably going to want to interact at that point, because that barrier has already been broken down, hasn't it?
That's exactly it. Awesome. Well, it's been great to chat, Matt. We're at the end of the 30 minutes, so I'm gonna draw a line under it here. But it's been great to have you on the show. We could probably, again, I feel like I say this every week. I could have chatted for hours. Maybe it's me.
You're coming round for your tea later, Paul. So
yeah, just leave the back door open. I'll be around as soon as I finish the next call. But no, great to speak with you, and hopefully it's opened a few of our viewers' eyes as to what's possible and technology that's out there. But again, as per the scroll bar underneath, we're a live show. But if you're watching this back and you want to get in touch with either myself or Matt, feel free to reach out. You can see us as part of the event. More than happy to have people drop us a DM or an email or whatever, and would love to speak with you. Anybody who's a regular viewer, look forward to seeing you next week, and we will be back next Thursday at 3 p.m. I'm not going to tell you who's the guest next week. That's it. All right. Thanks very much, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.